Hey guys, Palsteron here, and today let's talk about the Ascendancies that are going to come out for the new Legacy of Frisia event. There's 19 Ascendancies completely replacing the old ones, and we're going to take a look at all of them. In part 1 of this series, I already went over the first 9 ones. You can see that down below in the description. But yeah, we covered Ranger, Marauder, and Shadow, and now it's time for Witch, Duelist, Templar, and Scion. Same disclaimers in the first video. I can't test any of these, so all of this is a good guess, or at least what my experience would tell me. That doesn't mean that, for example, if I say an Ascendancy is bad, that there's not some niche where it's maybe broken or OP. Metas take time, so throwing out all of the Ascendancies out the window and then getting in new ones can completely change how the game works. And there's new questions that we've never asked before, so yeah. I'm definitely going to miss stuff 100%. But let's start off with Witch. And the first one is a little bit of a doozy. This is Harbinger, if you want to see it in full right here. Harby is a little bit of a letdown, in my opinion. Definitely one of the weaker ones. But yeah, let's just get into it. If you want to league start this, I'll say this. Maybe something like Hex Blast, potentially, because you get the 100% AoE of Hex skills. Maybe something like Impending Doom, if you really know what you're doing, because this 100% AoE is a big deal. Otherwise, a lot of these are just not that interesting, and like you really want to look at an Ascendancy that gives you a lot of power level early, because Ascendancies are free, you don't need to pay for them. But starting off, 30% energy shield and mana recovery is as decent as it gets for a recovery Ascendancy. Is not bad whatsoever. Mana recovery is really good for Archmage. It often struggles with regen. Energy shield recovery is okay, but usually energy shield builds really go for leech based stuff, although Trickster is not there anymore, so maybe decent node. But you'll kind of see like a little bit of a theme here where that's just not enough on this Ascendancy. You don't really have those oomph nodes love the other ones have. Then let's talk about Greater Harbinger of the Arcanes. I already prepped this right here. This one, yeah, this one basically cycles between, well, it doesn't cycle. It gives you a buff for 4 seconds. It's like a thingy. When you get into a map, and then it has a cooldown of 8 seconds, and it grants the following benefit: 10% cast speed, 30% mana regen. Then it grants 15% shock and 10% pen. Is that good for an Ascendancy? Not really. One thing I will say, depending on what of the Harbingers you have, is when you get into a map, they don't immediately start activating. So that's not that big of a deal for this one right here. But for example, for some of the others, it will be. Just so you know, if you're like, I don't know, boss rushing or whatever, and your maps take like 30 seconds. But in general, these Harbingers seem quite outdated. I'll tell you straight up. They're not. There's nothing really mythical about them other than that they give you buffs and they have a cooldown. I will talk about this node first though before we even go over the Harbingers. Buffs on you expire 30% slower. Debuffs on you expire 30% faster. The buffs on you expire 30% slower also counts for the Harbingers. So this node will give you better uptime, but at the end of the day, even if some of these Harbinger buffs would be permanent, they wouldn't be that strong other than maybe Harbinger Focus. This node here, 100% AoE of Hex skills, like I said, Hex Blast, and Impending Doom, that is very, very interesting. That is a lot of AoE. Anything with the Hex tag. And then Temporal Chains is no reservation if cast as an aura is also quite good. You can have a 2120 temp chains around you at all times. If you're for some reason a poison build, even better, but even just the slow, this is actually above average for an Ascendancy node if you can use the first line as well. Immune to curses, chill, and shock while channeling. I'm really not a huge fan of this. Even on channeling builds, you're not doing it all the time. And you want these kind of immunities all the time. So for me, it's a little bit too inconsistent personally. Also unaffected by chill. It's cute, but you can't even do, like if you do reverse chill or something like that, you have winter reef, right? So you don't even need it. Do note though that unaffected means that you still get shocked and get chilled. So if you have some kind of self-shock shenanigans, maybe for example, that's pretty nice, because self-shock, there's not that much out there right now. Self-chill is easy to get. And immune to curse. For me personally, not that big of a deal. We already talked about this node right here. Very strong overall. There's also some other stuff you can do it. Now the node after it is probably the most interesting one here. Grants Summon Greater Harbinger Focus, which is out of the Harbingers the most interesting one in terms of while you have it up, you get immune to status, stun immunity, 20% damage reduction, and immunity to curses. Now, Immortal Will. This is only up when channeling, as far as I understand, and the what's it called, the Immortal Will is a shield. I've actually seen this being played before, but it basically, yeah, it's usually on this shield. The problem with this buff is a lot of these you don't want to rely on some of the time, and it's, once again, not always up. So unless you can somehow get there, which you really can't, it'll be rough. Like, do you want to be immune to status ailment half of the time, or maybe like 80% of the time? Not really. The damage reduction, okay, but defenses like stun immunity, curse immunity, and ailment, like, you can't just get frozen if you get unlucky. And on top of that, it's also only while channeling, so I'm not really a big fan of this in general. Once again, a little bit of an iffy one. And then at the end, we have the 40% CDR right here, which is a pathing node to the Greater Harbinger of Time. Now, 40% CDR is pretty decent, as you might know. The Sabo node already has 30% CDR, and this one is straight up better, right? 40% CDR. So for something like Cast and Crit, you might think this is good, but then again, what else do you take on that Ascendancy? And CDR, you need, for example, on Cast and Crit, you need 52% to get to your breakpoint. So you can usually make that up with just Awakened, Cast on Crit, and a boot roll. Do you really need the CDR? It would have to be something else than Cast on Crit in general, but yeah. Greater Harbinger of Time, they really gutted this one. I used to play this back in the day. It used to give you 20% action speed. Yeah, they nerfed it to 10%. So now, basically, yeah, this is up basically all the time if you take the slower aura, but 10% action speed for an Ascendancy, it's okay. Okay at best. Once again, I'll say, the first 8 seconds you get into a map, this doesn't activate. It actually takes time to activate, unless they changed it. So, but in general, Harby, kind of a nothing burger. Let's move on. All right, next we have Herald. And this one is quite interesting if you want to do a Herald stacker. Or if you want to go for something like a minion build with Herald of Purity or Herald of Agony, which I'm not going to comment on too much. I don't know too much about that archetype, but it does look pretty solid. Now, is this a good League starter Ascendancy? I don't think so. This might be good in endgame if you know what you're doing, but it is quite weird as a League starter. So unless you're already a Herald main, I would probably stay away from this. It's still interesting to know though. So you have to take this note at the start. So this is basically the shtick of this Ascendancy, which is your aura skills are disabled and 200% increased mana reservation efficiency of Herald skills. Now Herald skills, usually you can't really work them all together in a build. Usually if you're fist scaling, Herald of Ice and Thunder are not that good, but you could maybe go Poison with Herald of Agony plus Herald of Purity, maybe some original Sin stuff with Herald of Ash. It's possible, but in general, they don't work together all that well. So having all of them mostly gives you other effects. For example, on the Herald nodes right here, you will see a few of these nodes have certain things that give you damage per Herald, for example, Endbringer, and that is where the synergy often ends. So yeah, you're going to be able to reserve everything, but what this node really is about is supporting your Heralds, which, I don't know, damage supports, for example, which would increase the reservation, and you will see a little bit of a theme there. So this is not really meant as like reserve all the Heralds, although you can. Now after this node, you have to take the second node, which is already a little bit weird. You're locked into 2 nodes and then you have very little freedom down here. I really don't like this concept. 1 locked in I think is fine, but 2 locked in is kind of wild. The second one gives you one of these 5 buffs. Now, it's basically you get 100% buff effect of that Herald and then accompanying stuff. Phase damage reduction, max res. Chaos res doesn't even get max res, it just gets 75 chaos res, which I guess is okay. In general, yeah, just pick one of them. Whatever is going to make sense for your build is going to be pretty obvious. And then after that, you have 2 nodes left. So let's go over those. On the left side, we have Damnation, which is literally Eternal Damnation in a Ascendancy form. If you don't know Eternal Damnation, this one used to be incredibly powerful. Gain additional elemental damage reduction equal to half your Chaos Res. Super strong, but it did get nerfed. And it now has this line down here, maximum endurance, frenzy, and power charge is 0, which is a pretty big deal in endgame. A lot of builds go Ralakesh, a lot of builds have some kind of power from charges, and it also has -5 max res. So yeah, this Ascendancy also has the charges, but it doesn't have the minus max res, which is quite a big deal. I think this is one of the stronger defensive Ascendancies, actually. Opening up your Emmy slot is ridiculously strong nowadays with Simplex Emmys, just overwhelming most builds. In terms of power level, Damnation is like, this node is very good. It's just in an Ascendancy that is very specific. but if you can make it pay off, super strong. Retribution, chance to gain elemental conflicts for 4 seconds when you kill an enemy. I'm not a fan. On-kill effects on an Ascendancy doesn't do anything against bosses, unless you maybe have something like Penance Mark from your ring, or I don't know, a Worm Flask to get on-kill on bosses. I really don't like it. But yeah, this gives you all three. This gives you chill, shock, and freeze chill while you have it up. It's like, I don't think it's good. On-kill effects, I just don't like them. That's basically all we have so far. Now on the right side, you're gonna see Scourge, which I can't really comment too much on. I've never played Herald of Purity or Herald of Agony, but this gives you a number of Sentinels of Purity, Virulence. I don't know if there's gonna be like a hybrid, if it's gonna be either one or the other. You have to ask somebody who's a little bit more versed with minion builds. But then we have two nodes that I'm semi-versed with, and those are the Herald damage node. So this is basically what you're supposed to do here with the 200% reservation you get at the start. You're supposed to reserve your mana for, I don't know, supports. So you put on Herald of Thunder and then you support it with 5 damage supports. It's going to take a lot of reservation. Weirdly enough, and it's a little bit odd about this Ascendancy, is you have to start out basically opting into this, which is only good if you deal damage with Heralds, but then you really only have 2 nodes that really that facilitate that, which is so awkward to me. Personally, I don't like it, and they're not even that good. Like, you had to pay a lot to be here. Plus 5 base crit for Herald skills, and they have 50% AoE. Don't get me wrong, that's not bad. Herald skills start off with 0 crit, so it's nice. But, I mean, you could also just equip a fishing rod, go Surfcaster, and have 100% crit on your Heralds. I don't know what to say about this. This is not... It's a good payoff node, don't get me wrong, but it's like, after you had to do this... I'm not sure. Plus 3 level of Herald skill gem, same thing. It is strong in a nutshell, but you had to work to get here. So is there going to be a Herald of Thunder, Herald of Ice build with this? Probably. One thing I will say is that you can't have power charges. So it's kind of weird that you, like, yeah. For crit, this is already a problem. But I guess if you go Heralds, you can't even take Damnation. So you're going to have 0 defensive nodes. And you're going to have to go 1, 2, and then damage. And it's... I don't know. I think this is just better on Surfcaster, if I'm going to be completely honest. But is there something here? The most likely one is going to be minions, because minions only have to take Scourge, and they can also take Damnation, so they'll also have defensive stuff. So, yeah, you'll have to ask somebody who's well-versed with those builds. Other than that, I don't think this Ascendancy does anything better than, for example, Surfcaster. But yeah. Alright, so let's go from 2 mediocre Ascendancies to 1 incredible one, or potentially incredible one. This is Bog Shaman, the 3rd Witch Ascendancy right here. Now, Bog Shaman is very complex and is going to be one of those builds that will probably pop off in like week 2 or something. Honestly, this Ascendancy looks broken to me. I don't think it's a good... I shouldn't say that. If you're good at the game, you can definitely League start this. But at that point, I don't need to tell you that. And if you're a new player, you should stay the hell away from this until you see like build guides coming out or something like that. This is a very complex Ascendancy. So let's start off with Venom Drinker. 100% chance to be poisoned, 5 max res while poisoned. You cannot be poisoned while there's at least 5 poisons on you. You can self-poison, get 5 max res. There's some obvious implications for this, mostly to do with the golden rule. But do note that you can only have 5 poisons. So there's also a shield that has self-poison. I'm not sure if you're actually going to use those together, so I'm not going to talk about it too much. But do note that this has 5 maximum res, not 5 maximum Ellie res. So it also counts for chaos. Quite strong. And there's probably going to be some nifty things with this. Fel Fen is basically unplayable unless you're Chaos Inoculation. Nearby enemies, Chaos res is 0. Chaos resistance is 0, so that's yours as well. Very strong effect up top. We don't know what nearby means. Usually if there's nothing on here, on Ascendancies, it means like 60 radius, which is almost the whole screen. So very strong. Chaos resistance is 0. Nowadays, I'm gonna be honest, if you're not immune to Chaos, that is kind of a death sentence. But if your build is super tanky, maybe you can pull something off like, I don't know, you don't invest anything, you have minus 60 Chaos res, and this is actually an upside. You would have to be ultra tanky, or you would have to have some kind of weird shtick against Chaos, which I'm not really sure of. Otherwise, this is just unplayable. Grants level 20 Pacify skill. Enemies pacified take increased damage. Pacify is a weird curse. I'm gonna be honest. I'm not even gonna talk about this too much. Pacify is like a delayed thing. With how Path of Exile usually plays, this is a weird like gimmick. I personally would not be looking into this. 30% increased damage is good, but do note that it's not always up. Only go for this if you have some weird reason to do. Then we have this cluster right here, which starts off with a 2-pointer. That 2-pointer is enemies have malediction, and you get increased reservation, which is for curse skills, which is basically on blasphemy. Nearby enemies have malediction, 10% reduced damage, 10% increased damage. Decent node overall. One thing you have to note with stuff like increased damage taken on enemies is it stacks additively with Wither once again, and Wither is yeah, just played across the board on Chaos builds. So if you're Chaos based, all of those effects are half as effective as they would be on a lot of the other builds. Decent node to go through, and then you get to two absolute powerhouses here. First up, Rotten Core, which has a self-damage mechanic. It's basically Scold's Bridle, but instead of 400%, it is 100%. Yeah, whenever you see self-damage, think broken. Most of these can be abused, and there is going to be builds with cast on damage taken mostly, cast on stun, stuff like that. So look out for this node, no matter what. Skills gain added chaos damage equal 40% of mana cost. We know there is a lot of ways to make your mana cost really high. Think Indigon, think Archmage. So gonna be quite interesting. I think there's gonna be something absolutely broken with this. I'll have to cook a little bit more. I'm sure people are already on it. And the second node is just as broken. Skills gain a base life cost equal to 25% of mana cost. Spells you cast yourself gain added fizz equal to 80% though. So these two, there's gonna be broken builds around this. There's not really any way around it. It's going to be a life stacker, mana stacker, something like that. It's going to be a few mirrors invested, and it's going to do like 1 billion damage. It's going to happen. So look out for these. Not going to be a league start scenario most likely, unless you know what you're doing. Now we have 4 nodes that are left on the side. I'm going to put myself here. I'll just knock the 2-pointer out here. Sanguine Power removes all energy shield and gain life instead of energy shield from equipped armor items. So on a body armor plus helmet plus boots plus gloves, you can get well around 2,000 energy shield. So this would be around about 1,000 something life. It's a broken node. Somebody's gonna make something broken with it. That's just how it is. There's Relic of the Pact, which would, I guess, be the most obvious one that I can see on this. Although I don't know if Relic of the Pact builds are actually gonna go for this Ascendancy. But yeah, anything that scales really well with life, a ridiculous Ascendancy. And then we go into the last one, which is actually also exciting, but for different reasons. Toad Pact, minus 20 to all raise, and then you get 50 prod speed, area of effect, and skill duration. Looking at skills, this is the most hype for. There's actually one skill that can make use of all of them, and that is Winter Orb. Winter Orb has a duration part, a projectile part, and an AoE part. However, Winter Orb has fallen out of favor because it's just an outdated skill. It has not gotten an update, and it doesn't do very much damage. And in the tier 17 meta, it's just kind of an issue not to have any damage. But that is potentially interesting. And then you have Pandemic, which is lose 5% of life per second if you've been hit recently, 40% more damage over time. Now, as far as I understand, if you are Chaos Inoculation and you get your life to 1, I think if you have 1 life regen somewhere, this should make up for it. As far as I know, don't shoot the messenger. So that's pretty cool. If you're life-based, I mean, a little bit of regen will solve this. But yeah, 40 more dot. What an absolute banger. What an absolute banger of a node. Ridiculous node. So if you're going for something like Winter Orb Poison or BV Poison or Spark even, which all make a lot of sense on Toad Pact, then yeah, this is going to be your go-to node. Once again, not something I think you should be doing on League Start. And that basically rounds out this Ascendancy. It's going to be extremely strong endgame. Probably one of the best Ascendancies. Probably top 3 or top 5. And League Start is going to be bottom 5. Moving on from which, we're now at Duelist, starting off with Gambler. And Gambler is pretty easily summed up as a totally solid Ascendancy. That is it. It's very solid. It does what it's supposed to do. I'm going to knock the bottom part off because there's only really 3 parts to this. And one of them is garbage. So overly confident, and these block nodes here are really bad. Like, I mean, bad. So you start off with the damage of enemies hitting you is unlucky while you are on low life. Now, if you think I heard this before, It's because this ring exists and nobody's ever using it. That's Lori's Lantern. And this ring isn't even that bad. It gives you res, it gives you movement speed, it gives you chaos res if you're in low life. So if somebody wanted this effect before, if it was that strong that you would want to invest in Ascendancy, you would have gotten the ring, which you don't. So that is all I have to say. This effect is not as good as you think it is. Enemy roll ranges are only high on lightning damage. So this would be like a steroid against lightning damage, a defensive one. It's okay against Fizz, and everything else, it's an absolute disaster. This is not a good node, period. It's very inconsistent as well in terms of defense, what defense goes. Heads and tails, it basically either gives you lucky spell block and unlucky attack block, or the other way around. Yeah, this is not worth it. And you also have to path through this. I'm not even going to go into the implications of this because you're never, ever going to take it. It is not good, period. It is not good. Second up, we have the shell that is very, very playable for a lot of elemental hit builds. Mostly attack, but not necessarily. We do start on Duelist though. Do remember that. We start off with Growing Accumulator, which gives you chance to deal triple damage, chance to deal double damage, but also deal less damage. This node on average is 16.6% more damage, which doesn't sound great. That is below average for an Ascendancy. However, they are damage spikes, right? So you get double damage, even with the less damage, that's still 50% more, and triple damage, that's 125% damage more with the less calced in. Those damage spikes are really good for ailments. So if you're going alt ailments, which also play really well with this elemental theme in general, right? Brittle, Scorch, and Sapped, then this node is a must-have. It's just very, very strong. Notice how a lot of alt ailment builds usually get some kind of double damage on their build. That is what this kind of is for you. The second node is okay. Spectacular Parlay. Your critical strike chance is lucky. Damage with hits is unlucky. Damage with hits is unlucky is not that big of a deal if you have a... basically, it rolls the ranges of damage twice. So, I don't know. If you have, for example, let's say you have a skill that deals 1 to 100 damage. If it rolls 2 on the first one and then 88 on the second one, it takes the higher one. Otherwise, you would have gotten 2. That's a very extreme example, but you kind of get what I mean, which is a good effect. And crit chance is exactly like that with like crit chance. Very strong if you have like 50% or something. And there is actually an effect like this already. It's called Dance with Death. However, this is your damage with crits is lucky and your crits is lucky. So people have been giving up their helmets for this effect. This one only has one of the parts and the other part is the downside. Potentially, if you have something like Archmage, for example, that just adds flat damage, which doesn't have a roll range or anything like that, this is an incredible node. One thing that is a little bit weird is Growing Accumulator, which you have to take to path to it, really wants you to get Brittle. Brittle gets you crit capped really easily, and then you take this, which says your critical chance is lucky. At that point, you don't need it anymore, because crit chance is lucky is best at around about 50 to 60%. So, do I think this is that great? I don't think that many people are going to take it, but yeah. I think there is a very solid shell here. I'm going to talk about in a second with Growing Accumulator, following up with Risk Aversion. Chance to avoid elemental damage, chance to avoid being stunned. This is a little bit underrated. I feel like chance to avoid LA ailments is kind of hard to get in nowadays meta because people are using a lot of unique boots. For example, Alberon's Warpath for Strength Stackers, or even more so, Ralakesh Impatience on a lot of builds. Let's put it that way. So every build that doesn't really need that movement speed roll is most likely going to go Ralakesh in some form, or a lot of them anyways. And then you lose your Avoid LA ailment from boots, which is what they're usually for. So a lot of people can't even run Ralakesh, and this could open up Ralakesh for them. Just getting this and the rest somewhere else. Chance to avoid being stunned is really nice. In case you don't know, if you are dex-based, there is a tattoo that gives you avoid being stunned, and it is 10%. Now, not everybody has 10 dex tattoos that they can just use for this, so getting 5 off of that is also quality of life. Not a huge node, but definitely a good one. Now let's get into the juicy ones at the end. Risky Exploit, minus res, and chance for elemental resistances to count as being 90 against enemy hits. Wow. First up, you can stack this with the shield that has the same effect. This goes up to 40%, so you can have up to 90% of that effect. Do note, though, that this is only against hits. So you cannot just do, oh, I'm just going to have 0 res and I'm just going to rely on this solely. And no, you can't, because you can only get 90% of this effect and you're still going to die on that 10% that you don't get it. Very strong effect. Doesn't work for dots. Doesn't work that 10% of the time. I think if you can't run the shield, this is a little bit worse. But if you can run the shield, this is quite incredible. It works with stuff like Transcendence, right? If, for example, look at Transcendence right here. Transcendence reduces your maximum res, which is basically all effects that reduce your max res for some upside are a lot stronger. Also, Replica Lore Wave, I'm pretty sure, has minus. So yeah, these just work really, really well because you only get that downside 1 out of 10 hits if you also use the shield. It's a good defensive node. You should not solely rely on this, but it's a nice addition. And the strongest one at the end, Reverse Odds. So this node is straight up broken. 50% chance to treat enemy res as inverted. One of the strongest nodes, period, on all Ascendancies. If you don't know, Ele Mastery right here. This is usually between 20 and 30% more damage on an elemental build. It is one of the reasons why a lot of builds actually work, because they will usually not get a lot of pen, but this just fixes that. It's the most likely node to get nerfed at some point. I'm not really sure why it's still there, but it is at 25%, and it stacks additively with this. Now, this, if you think about it, is basically like Inquisitor. Inquisitor says enemies res is negated, so it's always at 0. It gets ignored. However, this one is a little bit different because if the enemy res is at 50, it's actually a minus 50. If it's on 0, right? So it kind of evens out. It is kind of like that. However, it's better than Inevitable Judgment because it stacks with the Ascendancy, which this does not. You cannot use the Ascendancy with this because it doesn't do anything. And you can still skill Penetration. It's not great, but it does something, which is a huge upside. So in general, Reverse Odds is a better Inevitable Judgment, and Inevitable Judgment is already good. This node is insane when you need it, but Inquisitor obviously has other stuff, like, for example, Righteous Providence, which is ridiculous. So, in general, how good is this Ascendancy? I would say if you don't really have any fit for your attack-based Ele build, this is a decent fit. I don't think this is going to be GG. I don't think it's going to be broken on anything, but it is going to be a solid option. Moving on with the Duelist Ascendancies right here, we have Paladin, and this is another top 5 Ascendancy for me. Absolutely broken Ascendancy for one single reason. I think this is a great League starter Ascendancy on softcore. However, you will have to think about your defenses somehow because this is a very offensive Ascendancy, which Paladin usually doesn't imply. That name for me would imply like a well-rounded beast maybe. But yeah, no. This is party play. But for solo play, it is going to be very offensive. To knock this out first, I'm not a party player. So if you want to know about this, you should watch Snap OW, I think, on YouTube about all this Link stuff. I don't know much about it. Do note that I think Field Medicine actually works for you as well, if it's worded correctly. If not, don't shoot me. Non-unique utility flasks also apply to Link target. That shouldn't matter. It doesn't say instead. So it should still work for you, even if you don't have a Link target. As far as the wording goes, that's what it would imply. Just saying. So if that's true, which I'm not sure, but if it's true, that is a better Pathfinder node. So we're already off on a good start. That's like 21% movement speed with Quicksilver Flask alone. Very good, if it works. However, the reason this Ascendancy is broken, I'll just straight up come out with it. This is the second point in this one here. Elemental Valiance. 25% chance to trigger level 20 Elemental Relic. You might be asking, what the hell is an Elemental Relic? Let me actually see if you can find it here. Yeah. So Elemental Relic is a kind of aura buff, like a minion thingy, that gives you one of 3 abilities. Basically level 27 Anger, level 27 Hatred, and a level 27 Wrath. If you look at these numbers, think about getting this for free on an attack-based build. You can... I mean... It is ridiculous. You can slam this on a Paradoxica, get the double damage, get some pen, some attack speed, and you're gonna do millions of damage. This node is ridiculous, and it already exists, you might remember, on Guardian. This node is actually so good that I was even considering Guardians on some of my League starters because it just carries. That's how good it is. And the rest of Guardians sucks. So that already gives you a estimation. If I had to estimate how good this Ascendancy point is I would say it's round about the strength of 2 to 3 Ascendancy nodes, just on its own. You do, however, need a fast-hitting attack, because otherwise you're not going to trigger it efficiently. But if you're something like a bow build, like Blade Storm, something like that, maybe General's Cry, then you're going to be fine, just straight up. This is why I think this is a really good League Start Ascendancy. The worse your weapon is, the stronger Elemental Valiants will carry you. The node you have to take before it is nearby enemies take 25% increased LA damage, which is straightforward, decent, nothing to write home about. Anything else? So these aura nodes, Discipline, Determination, Grace, I don't really know what to do with these. They're level 30, but you still have to reserve them, just so you know. So they save you a gem slot. You can't use Enlighten on them. Once again, this is not PoE2. You can't support them with anything. Also, level 30 D-Term is not even that much better. And this goes for all of these, but I'll just show it to you on D-Term. A level 21, which you could usually have, goes from 1,077 and 50% more armor to 1,673 and 54. That is not that crazy. That's like gloves worth of armor. It's not that big of a deal. You can't support it. You can't put it into your boots. It's like, I don't see when you would ever use this. I'm gonna be completely honest. Consecrated Crown is 5% regen and 50% reduced curse effect. You basically have it up always. It's strong. Is it worth an Ascendancy? Probably not. It's okay if you have to fill. And the last node's very exciting. Bring the Battle. Enemies taunted take 20% increased damage. Now, this second node never works on you, by the way, unless it's different than the champion node we already have. The champion node has the same wording, and I know that this does not work for you. This one right here. However, who knows? This does not work for you. It works for Ballista's damage reduction and your minions' damage reduction, though. And War Cries have infinite power. Now, you might notice this already exists on the current Chieftain, and people aren't really using it too much, and that's because Chieftain kinda is meh. It's like okay at best. But that effect is pretty good, on League Start especially. For example, you go into a map, you press an Enduring Cry, and you instantly get 5 power charges, because you always max out what these do. You cannot automate them with automation, because then it, like auto exertion, because then the buff goes away and you just care about the buff here, most likely anyways. So yeah, you can do Battle Mage's Cry for base crit. You activate it, you get 2.5 base crit. Enduring Cry, you get a lot of regen. I'm talking 10% regen, you get Enduring Cry, and all of this scales with War Cry effect from the passive tree. So if you're willing to press buttons, this is incredible in the League Start scenario. So yeah, that's about all I have to say about this Ascendancy. One of the best ones, IMO. Pretty straightforward. You get a lot of flat damage from Elemental Valiants. You can do stuff with War Cries. Very solid increased damage taken. If this Utility Flask works, it's going to round out the Ascendancy really well. Otherwise, you have to take Consecrated Ground maybe. The rest is a little bit iffy, but in general, super strong package. The main issue with this Ascendancy, though, is you have to figure out your defenses. So you cannot rely on your Ascendancy for defenses, so you'll have to do something elsewhere. Moving on to the third Duelist Ascendancy, and this one is Aristocrat. And oh boy, this is top 3 endgame Ascendancy, easily. Yeah, I don't know what they were thinking about this. So, okay. So this is very reminiscent of the Path of Exile 2 Gemling Legionnaire, but okay, let's bear with me. So you have to take these first 2 points. This gives you 5 passive skill points. Now, all the small points also give you 1 passive skill point. In case you don't know, 5 skill points on most min-maxed builds is worth an Ascendancy. It makes your build a lot more flexible, so it gives you new avenues that you can explore. With Cluster Jewels and Adorned and stuff like that, it can be very strong. It's usually not stronger than an average Ascendancy, but it can be good. So this is never a bad note to take. After that, we have 2 ways. I'm going to start with the worst one first. You go up and you get +1 to level of all skills. Is that good for an Ascendancy? Not really. It's okay at best. You get +3 level of non-exceptional support gems. That also does count for Awakened gems. So stuff like Awakened Cast on crit, I suppose. So usually you have a level 6 Awakened Cast on crit. You get +3 from the Mastery. So you're on 34. And then you get another 3. So you go to 40. That would be 6% CDR. So if you multiply that on all your support gems, it's probably going to be okay, but I'll be honest, you're never taking this if you're going Aristocrat IMO. 15% quality of skill gems sounds good and is good on some things. As you will see, this whole Ascendancy screams Siege Ballista from top to bottom. If you don't know, the quality is incredible. But, yeah. Will you take the side if you go for this? Very, very unlikely. Let's explore the bottom. So here you have 3 nodes that give you increased int, strength, and dexterity, and also give you effects against ailments. This is basically, what's the belt called again? I'm so PV2 brained right now. There it is, Cyclopean Coil. This is basically a Cyclopean Coil in a neat package. Cannot be frozen if the dexterity is higher, cannot be ignited, cannot be shocked. Okay, so that is ridiculous already. 30% increased of an attribute on an attribute stacker is ridiculous, straight up. And if you're a dex stacker, you get cannot be frozen. If you're an int stacker, you get cannot be shocked. Cannot be ignited is okay. Either way, this is just a nice little bit on top. Super, super strong nodes. And here comes the kicker. Dreadful Attitude. Items and gems have 25% reduced attribute requirements, 5% increased damage per 5 of your lowest attribute. I do not know if this is a typo. I'm going to assume not. So this effect exists on Cyclopean Coil, but it's 1% per 5. And you also get it from the Mastery, which is once again 1% per 5. What this means is, unless it's a typo, this Ascendancy on a tri-stacker gives you around about 1000% increased damage, straight up. Which, yeah, you're going to see builds like that. Once you get into the mirror range, there's going to be some people making builds with 1 billion damage. So that's all it really is. If you want some inspiration for this, there is a build with Poised Prism and some kind of bow skill that basically makes itself. There's a Curtain Call build that basically makes itself. And spoiler alert, the build's pathing is probably going to look something like this. Take the attribute wheels, take all the cluster jewels, take Adorned. Yeah, probably 12 passive cluster jewels with +2 attributes, +2 one of the other attributes, all attributes. Maybe some kind of mana stacker in between. We'll have to see. This is going to be one of the most broken endgame builds we're going to have in general. As for league starting, I think the only thing you can... I mean, you can league start this if you know what you're doing, once again. But I think if you want to league start Siege Ballista on Hierophant was always a little bit sketchy. You usually had to play something else for a while, like Explosive Arrow or something. And even after you respec, it wasn't that great. The problem was always you're so goddamn squishy, and in the new age PoE, that doesn't really fly. So if you wanted to league start Siege Ballista, this is probably your chance, because Hero is just kind of, yeah. There's no real Ascendancy on the right side that you could usually use it for, but yeah, if you ever wanted to league start, and you even saw this in the trailer, by the way, they played Siege Ballista when showing off this Ascendancy. If you ever wanted to play Iron Commander and get like 20 ballistas, this is probably your chance, but you're going to be quite squishy, so you're probably going to have to be relegated to some kind of bossing and just make the one-shot Siege Ballista build that has like 1 billion damage. All right, so we're done with Duelist. Last... well, almost last, we have Templar Ascendancies, Architect of Chaos. Now, I could be talking about this one for an hour, and you will probably see me play this at some point, depending on how much time we have in the league, but this is Vow-themed, Lifestacker-themed, kind of like that. So, let's start off with the Vow stuff. 50% reduced soul game prevention duration. Now, if you don't know, Vow skills, right, once you use them, have a soul gain prevention, so you can't just spam them. However, soul gain prevention can be circumvented because on all Vow skills that have a duration, for example, Vow Blade Vortex, it says modifiers to skill effect duration also apply to this skill's soul gain prevention. So what that means is if you have 100% reduced duration, you basically have no soul. Like, you can just spam it over and over, right? If you have the souls for it. It still costs souls. But technically, if you have the souls, you can spam it. However, with this, you only need 50% reduced duration because this stacks additively with reduced soul gain prevention duration. So now you could have, obviously 100% reduced duration sucks on a duration-based skill. Now though, you can have this and still have like 50% duration over. It also gives a ton of crit chance. The problem is on a lot of skills, that is just not that great, because you still have to figure out the skill cost, the Vow skill cost. Now, a few things obviously come to mind. The first one is Hateforge, right? So for attack-based builds, you can just build Rage, go Chainbreaker, go Mana Regen, which is going to be converted to Rage Regen, and use Hateforge. Not a League Start thing, that's for sure. So in general, what I'm going to tell you is not a good League Start Ascendancy. Not at all, unless you know exactly what you're doing. Okay. But you could be doing something with spells here, at which point you have the issue of what do you go for though? How do you solve your Val cost? Because if you go Fever of Corruption, now you have increased skill effect duration, which screws up your reduced skill effect duration. So you can't take this node. There is one option here, which is Shepherd of Souls. Now, Shepherd of Souls is usually just on this shitty scepter that nobody uses, but it gives you 80% less soul cost. And if you use the Val skill in the last 8 seconds, it increases that by 100. So for example, we're just going to take 100. If it usually takes 100 souls, then it only takes 20. But if you cast one Val skill, it's 40, 60, 80, and so on. Is that viable? Well, on something like, I don't know, Val Cold Step, it could be fine. But once again, this won't let you spam a skill. So you can't just spam Val Spark or something. Something that's duration-based and you only have to click once every so often. It's all right. For attack-based skills, the issue you have right now is that on Val Lightning Strike, which is probably the strongest Val skill in general, you already have this one right here, Socketed, because we're still in Settlers League. Socketed Val skills have 100% reduced soul gain prevention duration, which is going to be what you always go for. It's insane. You don't need to do anything. And on spell-based builds, you still have to figure out, yeah, the cost. So it's kind of rough. I guess one thing I could mention is maybe Val Earthquake. While Earthquake, you only have to press so often. So you could actually go on League Start, maybe no Hateforge. You don't need the enchant and you do something with it. But yeah, once again, this is a little bit more advanced. After that, after these two nodes, which are quite high, we have +3 level of all Val skill gems. The problem here is, once again, for spells, this is a little bit iffy. And spells usually get the most out of skill levels. Whereas attack-based builds, which get a little bit more off of this, don't really care about the skill levels. So it's interesting because I think GG actually understands the dynamic. And yeah, it's an interesting toolbox. It's going to be a little bit rough to figure out. Now then we have Forbidden Secrets, which Shepherd of Souls we already talked about. It also gives you Everlasting Sacrifice though. And Everlasting Sacrifice is a banger. When you reach full energy shield, sack it all to gain 5 max res for 4 seconds. So this is usually on a Mahug Zodl, which is kind of awkward because it's completely screws your recovery because it gives you all these other keystones. But if you just get Everlasting Sacrifice alone, this is extremely easy to upkeep. And you can do stuff like just have 10 energy shield and get like a little bit of energy shield on hit. And then just, I don't know, hit 2 times, you go to full, go to 0, go to full, and so on. So you just have this constantly. And 5 max res, including Chaos res, this is not LE max res, is an incredible node. So just very solid overall. This solution is pretty ridiculous as well. Removes all energy shield. Life that would be lost by taking damage is instead reversed. And you like, if you've never played with Dissolution of the Flesh, it is quite a banger of an item, but also super awkward to play with. So basically your recovery is this. If you don't get hit for 2 seconds, you get your full life back. That is it. Leech and regen and all of that is completely worthless. However, what people do is with something like Wrathpith Globe that sacrifices a lot of your life, now that doesn't matter anymore because only your reserved life you actually lost. This is basically free. Also, Petrified Blood you get for free. So you get the damage reduction from Petrified Blood as well for free. It is a very strong effect. The problem with Dissolution always was 2 seconds is a long ass time. Now guess what's less than 2 seconds? 1 second. I think that this node is one of the most broken nodes, period, anywhere. It's on a weird ascendancy, so you're not going to be able to just slam it on every build. But if your build needs recovery, or it has some kind of weird shtick, or it wants to go Wrathpith, this node is ridiculous. Going from 2 to 1 second is unfathomable, right? It's literally half. And it's going to make it so much less clunky. However, it's still going to be clunky. You will still going to need some kind of avoidance, right? To go with it, like block or, I don't know, evasion. Otherwise, this will be weird, but people will be playing this node and it will be broken good. In Pure Blood, so at the end here, we have a little life cluster or a cost life reservation cluster. Skills cost life instead of mana, so that is basically blood magic without having the downside, which is quite nice. If you think about a lot of setups, they usually go life tap on a lot of things. You don't have to do that anymore. I mean, just really, really good, especially on spellcasters, which are struggling for mana. If you have some kind of way to, yeah, I don't know, get life recovery, or if you're using Dissolution, which doesn't care about this, then yeah, incredible node. Then you have Hewn Flesh, skills reserve life instead of mana, 100% increased life reservation efficiency of skills. So you could do something like Ivory Tower and Mind over Matter. That is the first thing I'm thinking about, but then you can't go Dissolution. So this is going to be a little bit trickier to figure out, but the increased life reservation is definitely something to look out for. In general, I'm really hyped about this solution. I'm really hyped about this Ascendancy overall. Oh, I guess I forgot one node, Glimpse Chaos. 8% life for each corrupted item, mana for each corrupted item, -4 res. It's an okay node overall, nothing to write home about. You have to make up for the res, you get life, you get energy shield. You're not going to corrupt your crazy items. I don't know. Like having to corrupt one of your 100 div rings that you would otherwise be able to sell. They can't recraft whatever you crafted. It's an absolute build maker's nightmare having to corrupt all your items. So it is what it is. I'm going to leave this one out. In general, don't league start this unless you're a veteran of the game. But yeah, you're going to hear more of this Ascendancy for sure. Moving on to the second Templar Ascendancy, which is Polytheist. I'm going to cut this one short. There are... I don't want to talk about this Ascendancy because nobody's going to take this Ascendancy IMO. It has Burning Hoofprints, triggers level 20 Aberrath's Fury, which is going to carry you easily through the campaign. You're going to one-shot everything while just walking over it. So what this Ascendancy is good for, in my opinion, is you take Burning Hoofprints. Let's say you want to go Architect of Chaos or Puppeteer. You go Polytheist first. You take Aberrath's Hoofs. You run over everything, one-shot it. Take some spell damage on the tree to support it, maybe some fire damage, and then later you respec into real Ascendancy. That's my honest opinion. There's a few notes here that are okay, but overall, this is an absolute mishmash of randomness. The only thing I can see is maybe a Shockwave Totem build with min charges, and then you get Nova spells cast without having to get that expensive ring that also gives you less AoE, right? That might be an angle, but then what else do you take? It's just, yeah, it's just kind of a nothing burger. And then we have the last Templar Ascendancy, which is Puppeteer. I'm also not going to comment on this one really, but for a different reason. Not because it sucks, but because I'm not really a minion player and minions are quite intricate. So if you want to know about this, look at your favorite minion streamer or minion content creator. They will tell you more about this. And then we have a top 3 Ascendancy at the end, which is the Scion, and that's the Scavenger. So... okay, I could be talking about this one for like an hour. I'm going to try to cut it short as much as I can. But here's how Scion works. First, you take 1 node, 2 node. That's your first Ascendancy. You get nothing. You get 2 passive points, basically. On your second Ascendancy, you can take this one here, pick one of the choices, and then start pathing. On your third Ascendancy, you get either the top or the bottom. And then on the fourth Ascendancy, you can't go for either of these again because these have 2 pathing nodes. You have to go for the back one. So long story short, you get 1 choice here, 1 choice here, and then 1 choice of either top or bottom. If you are a new player and you made it this far into video, first up, you are destined for PoE because you just watched a 1-hour video without really knowing the game. Kudos. But if you're a new player, just know you cannot just start a Scion. If your account is fresh, you need to get to Act 3 before Dominus. Better just kill Dominus, right? The Act 3 boss. And then you, in your starting screen, you're going to see the Scion. Before you cannot start the Scion. And the reason they made that in the past is because Scion is really bad to start out with. You start in the middle of the passive tree. It is an absolute shitfest to level this, and I would never recommend it to a new player. Even with Scavenger, a lot of the power is going to come later. So don't do it. Do not do it. If you need to do it though, you're probably going to want to go something like Power Siphon Mines, and you want to grab Destructive Apparatus here. But yeah, you need a guide. If you like, Scion is going to be a shit show. That's all I'm saying. But it is an incredible Ascendancy for basically anything. Let's start. I'm going to do this rapid fire. Stasis Prison. Debuffs on you expire faster. There's some cool stuff with Beacon of Madness there. All the debuffs. You can scale this effect up to like 400% or something. Look it up on Reddit. I don't know. There's going to be some weird, fancy meme builds with this. Recoup this life, always nice. Maybe Forbidden Right or something. Cloak of Flame is the most busted thing I've ever seen. Like 40% of Fizz is extra fire. You're going to see hardcore players on this basically having like 100k Fizz max hit. It's going to be ridiculous. Most people are going to take this from the first Ascendancy. It's so good. It's ridiculous. Fox Shade, increased movement speed when on full life. Damage is unlucky when you're in full life. This works with Chaos Inoculation, which is what most people are going to use this for. Quite strong. Shavs, Chaos damage taken does not bypass Energy Shield. Now, if you know Ivory Tower builds, they usually have to take this weird-ass Flask, right? Coruscant Elixir. Shout out to Captain Lance. You don't have to do that if you have Shavs. Will you do that? I'm not really sure. But yeah, relying on a Flask for your defenses was always kind of a shit show, and now you don't have to do that anymore. Possibly strong. Increased effect of shrine buffs on you. You have lesser brutal, massive shrine. If you watch the first part, I said if you want to go shrine stacking, there's going to be a better ascendancy. This is it. You're going to go Blunderbore. There you go. Now, after this, we're going to do the second one because these two you have to pick one from. So from here, you picked one, and now from the back row, you also have to pick one, and then in between, we're going to go over as well. On the right side, we have Tainted Pact. Taking chaos damage over time heals you instead while leeching life. Kinda broken. Problem is we don't have Slayer. So Overleech is not really there. However, you can still get Overleech with one of the keystones. I forgot how it's called, but it's on Glorious Vanity. One of the Glorious Vanity keystones. So yeah, look out for that. Maybe there's going to be something broken with this infinite regen or something. Fury Valve is incredible. Modifiers to number of proc applied to the number of targets split towards. Skills fired 2 projectiles. This is very, very good for something like Power Siphon, something like Kinetic Blast of Clustering, where this first line doesn't matter. It's straight up just 2 additional projectiles, but it's not good on everything. Dodri's Tongue is very bad. Don't take this. If you like, you will never need to take this. I don't think so. Leadership's Price is absolutely busted. So you get Scorching, Brittle, and Sapping Conflux. This is a amulet. So Leadership's Price is very underrated because what it does is it doesn't just give you Brittle, Scorch, and Sap. It gives you Conflux, which means all your damage counts towards all of those ailments. So people are going Interrogation for Secrets of Suffering, but the problem is this just gives you Scorch, Brittle, and Sap, which means your cold damage can Brittle, your fire damage can Scorch, and your lightning damage can Sap. But this Ami makes it so all your damage can do all of those things. So you're always going to be capped on all the... You're going to have full Brittle effect, full Scorch effect, full Sap effect without having to invest anything into ailment effect, or maybe a little bit, but yeah. Leadership's Price is broken, but Ami slots are also insane. So the reason you don't see Leadership's Price is only because Ami slots are just too good. So having this on Ascendancy though, ridiculous. Like ridiculous note. You're going to see this quite a bit. Death's Rush, gain Adrenaline on kill. I don't really love on kill effects or stuff that isn't good against bosses on Ascendancies, but if you have to, just take it. It's a lot of movement speed. Chaos damage could ignite, chill, and shock. There's quite some interesting things you can do with this with Explodey. I think Pox already said he might be doing something with this. He at least called it out in his video, so that's pretty cool. I don't really know what else to say. Do remember that we don't have Elementalist, so if you want to do some weird chaos damage, ignite shenanigans, this is probably your only choice. Then we have the nodes on the top. If you choose the top side, you cannot go for the bottom side. Do remember that. Don't know much about minions. Cerberus Limb gives you some defenses, Spell Leech. It's okay, but overall gets outshined by a lot of these other options. I'm going to put myself here. Battle Mage, very strong. You get a little bit of light radius. Very strong effect. You need to know what you're doing. The problem with Battle Mage is a lot of the items you would use it for are usually unique, and we're still in Settlers League. Uniques get no enchant, so might be a little bit iffy, but we'll see. On the right side, though, we have the 3 bangers. Enemies you kill explode, always great for clear. Could do something with this Explodey, and then the chaos damage can ignite, maybe, potentially for some crazy chains. However, Void Battery is something else. 25% increased spell damage per power charge, plus 1 maximum power charge. There are a lot of skills, especially wand skills now. Power Siphon, you're going to see a lot on Scavenger. It has conversion. 150% of spell damage counts towards attack damage. So let's say you have 10 power charges, which is like decently viable to reach. We're talking about 375% increased damage on something like a Power Siphon, or 500% increased damage on something like Kinetic Blast of Clustering, because that one has 200% conversion. So crazy. Yeah, this node is crazy. It's insane. You're going to see it everywhere. The Fulcrum, this arguably the most underrated ascendancy on this. Elemental ailments you inflict are reflected to you. If you don't know Fulcrum, this is a staff, and people actually sacrifice. It doesn't have a lot of good stuff other than this line right here. It doesn't have that many like insane things, and people are literally sacrificing both their weapon slots just to use this. And it's also get quite expensive. So why is this so good? The reason is self-chill, right? Usually, if you think about self-chill on something like a Surfcaster, you're going to have to scale chill effect, because just because you chill an enemy doesn't mean you get 30% action speed. You might only get 10, because chill starts at 10. So you have to scale elemental ailment effect, which can be quite cumbersome on some builds. However, with Fulcrum, if it scales off of your damage, you don't. If you chill an enemy for 30, you also chill yourself on 30. So with this ring and that ascendancy, you straight up get 30% more movement speed and 30% more attack and cast speed, which is, yeah. I mean, you cannot get that anywhere else. You can get it, like I said, on Surfcaster, but you're going to have to do some weird stuff. Here, it's just quote-unquote free. One of the issues is you need to be also, unless you deal, let's say you're not physical, right? You don't need to make use of these conversions. Let's say you're, I don't know, just you don't have any lightning damage and don't have any fire damage, that's fine. But if you have those damage types, you're also going to shock and ignite, and they're also going to reflect on you, and you're insta going to die. So you need unaffected by ignite and unaffected by shock, which you kind of want anyways. You just have to make sure that, or you can also be immune to it, but you just have to make sure that you're not immune to chill, because then you can't self-chill anymore. So what that means is you can't just use anything like Purity of Elements, because it makes you immune to all elemental ailments, including chill, and that overrides the self-chill. Overall, Fulcrum, busted, high movement speed, insane. Between Void Battery and Fulcrum for a lot of builds, this is going to be a tough choice. All right, that's about it. Those are all the ascendancies. I hope I could give you a little bit of an insight in maybe what to play or steer you in a direction. I didn't just want to throw out POBs because honestly, this is around theory crafting, and I would love if a lot of people make their own builds. That would be really, really cool. Because we have limited time. Even if they make it 3 months or something, we're going to have limited time with these ascendancies, and it's going to be quite fun to see what people come up with. So in general, I hope the video helped you out, and yeah, wish you all the best. I'm going to put out a League Starter video soon. Most likely, you're going to see that. And yeah, since I still don't have a slogan, see you next time.